The story of Jesus did not end with the empty tomb. In fact, that was only the beginning.
The world had witnessed many prophets, many teachers, and many kings.
But what happened after the resurrection of Jesus would change the course of human history forever. The followers of Jesus were no longer afraid.
Only days before, they had been hiding behind locked doors, terrified of the Roman authorities and religious leaders. But now something had changed. They had seen the risen Christ. They had spoken with him. They had touched his wounds. They had eaten meals with him. And that experience transformed ordinary fishermen into fearless messengers. The message they carried was simple yet revolutionary. Jesus was alive. Not just alive in spirit or memory. Alive in reality. The resurrection was not just a miracle for them, it was proof that death itself had been defeated. And this belief gave them courage the world had never seen before. The city of Jerusalem soon became the center of this growing movement. Thousands began gathering to hear the teachings of the apostles. Among them, the most outspoken was Peter. The same Peter who once denied knowing Jesus 3 times now stood boldly before massive crowds. He proclaimed that Jesus was the promised Messiah. The one foretold by ancient prophets. The one who had come to save humanity. And something extraordinary began happening. People from different cultures and nations were drawn to the message. Merchants, travelers, laborers, soldiers, scholars, and ordinary families began listening. The teachings spread like wildfire. Love your enemies. Forgive those who hurt you. Care for the poor. Serve others instead of seeking power. These ideas were radically different from the harsh world people lived in. And because of that, the message spread rapidly. But powerful messages always face powerful opposition. Religious leaders in Jerusalem began to feel threatened. The movement of Jesus' followers was growing too fast. They feared losing control over the people. So they began arresting the apostles. Peter and John were imprisoned and warned never to speak about Jesus again. But their answer shocked the authorities. They said, "We must obey God rather than men." The message continued spreading. Even persecution could not stop it. In fact, persecution only made the message stronger. Because when people saw believers willing to suffer for their faith, they realized something powerful was happening. One of the most tragic moments came with a man named Stephen. Stephen was a devoted follower of Jesus and one of the first Christian preachers. He spoke with passion and wisdom. But his bold preaching angered the religious authorities. They accused him of blasphemy. He was dragged outside the city. And there, Stephen became the first Christian martyr. As stones rained down upon him, he prayed for the people killing him. His final words echoed the words of Jesus. "Lord, forgive them." Even in death, the teachings of Jesus were alive. But Stephen's death had another unexpected consequence. Among those watching the execution was a young man named Saul. Saul believed he was defending his religion. He became one of the fiercest persecutors of Christians. He hunted believers from city to city. He arrested them. He approved their punishment. But history was about to take a dramatic turn. One day, while traveling to Damascus to capture more Christians, something extraordinary happened. A bright light suddenly surrounded Saul. He fell to the ground. And he heard a voice. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Terrified, he asked, "Who are you?" The answer changed his life forever. "I am Jesus." Saul was blinded by the light. For 3 days he could not see. He neither ate nor drank. During that time, he reflected deeply on everything he believed. Soon a Christian disciple named Ananias was sent to meet him. Ananias prayed for Saul. And Saul's sight returned. But more importantly, his heart had changed. The man who once persecuted Christians now became one of the greatest missionaries in history. Saul later became known as Paul. And Paul began traveling across the Roman world spreading the message of Jesus.
He visited cities like Antioch, Corinth, Ephesus, and Rome.
Everywhere he went, he preached about love, grace, and redemption.
Some people welcomed him.
Others attacked him.
He faced imprisonment, beatings, and countless dangers.
But he never stopped. Because Paul believed the message of Jesus was meant for everyone.
Not just one nation. Not just one culture. But the entire world.
As years passed, the Christian movement continued growing.
Small gatherings of believers formed communities.
They shared meals together. They prayed together. They cared for the sick and the poor.
Their unity amazed the people around them. In a divided and violent world, they created communities built on compassion.
But the Roman Empire soon noticed this growing movement.
At first, the Romans considered Christians a small Jewish sect. But as the movement spread, suspicion increased.
Christians refused to worship Roman gods. They refused to call the emperor a god.
This was seen as rebellion.
And so began one of the most difficult chapters in Christian history.
Persecution.
Christians were arrested. Some were tortured. Others were executed in brutal ways.
Yet something remarkable happened.
The more the empire tried to destroy Christianity, the stronger it became.
Because the message of Jesus was not built on political power. It was built on faith.
And faith cannot be imprisoned. By the end of the 1st century, Christianity had spread across vast regions of the Roman Empire.
From Jerusalem to Rome. From Asia Minor to North Africa. From Greece to Syria.
What began with a small group of frightened disciples had become a global movement.
And at the center of it all was the story of one man. Jesus of Nazareth. A carpenter's son. A teacher who preached love.
A man who challenged corruption.
A man who forgave his enemies. A man who died on a cross. And a man whom millions believed had risen from the dead. Over the centuries that followed, the teachings of Jesus shaped civilizations.
They influenced art, music, literature, philosophy, and law.
Hospitals were founded in his name.
Charities were built around his teachings.
Entire cultures were transformed by the idea that every human being has value. Because according to Jesus, every person is loved by God. But the story of Jesus is not just history.
It is a story that continues today.
Every time someone forgives instead of seeking revenge,
the Spirit of Jesus lives.
Every time someone helps the poor, the teachings of Jesus live. Every time someone chooses love over hate,
the message of Jesus continues.
And that is why, more than 2,000 years later,
the story still inspires billions.
Because the life of Jesus was not just about miracles. It was about a new way of living. A way built on compassion. On mercy. On courage. On sacrifice. And on love.
The story that began in a small town called Bethlehem would echo through every corner of the earth.
Empires would rise. Empires would fall.
But the message of Jesus would remain.
And perhaps the most powerful truth of all is that the story is still being written?
In every heart that chooses faith.
In every act of kindness. In every life changed by hope.
The story of Jesus continues.
Forever. Long before the modern world was born. Before nations rose and borders were drawn.
There existed an empire so powerful that people believed it would last forever. It was the mighty Roman Empire.
From the deserts of the Middle East to the forests of Europe, from the sands of North Africa to the islands of the Mediterranean, Rome ruled the known world.
Massive roads connected cities across continents. Great armies protected the empire.
Magnificent temples and arenas stood as symbols of Roman glory.
But history teaches one eternal truth.
No empire, no matter how powerful, lasts forever.
And as Rome slowly began to crumble, another force was quietly rising.
A faith. A belief. A movement that would outlive empires.
That faith was Christianity.
The seeds of change.
In the early centuries, Christianity had once been a persecuted faith.
Followers of Jesus Christ were hunted, imprisoned, and sometimes executed. Yet something remarkable happened. The more the empire tried to destroy Christianity, the stronger it became. Communities of believers began spreading across Roman cities. Churches were formed.
Scriptures were copied. Leaders called bishops guided the growing faith. And then came a turning point that changed history forever.
Constantine and the transformation of Rome.
In the early 4th century, a Roman emperor named Constantine the Great rose to power. Before a crucial battle, Constantine reportedly had a vision of a cross in the sky. The message he believed he saw was simple.
In this sign, you will conquer.
Soon after, Constantine issued a revolutionary decree. It was called the Edict of Milan.
For the first time in Roman history,
Christianity was made legal.
No longer hunted. No longer forced underground.
Churches were built across the empire. Christian leaders gained influence.
The faith that had once been persecuted was now protected by the emperor himself. The Roman Empire divides. But while Christianity was rising, the empire itself was beginning to weaken.
The vast territory of Rome had become difficult to control. Political corruption spread through the government.
Economic problems grew worse. Barbarian tribes pushed against the borders. To manage the crisis, Roman leaders divided the empire into two parts: the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire.
The western half ruled from Rome. The eastern half ruled from a magnificent city called Constantinople.
This Eastern Empire would later become known as the Byzantine Empire. While the West slowly declined, the East grew stronger. Christianity becomes the empire's faith.
Later, another emperor made a historic decision.
His name was Theodosius I. In 380 AD, he declared Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Pagan temples were closed. Christian churches multiplied. The empire that once persecuted Christians
had now fully embraced their faith.
But even this transformation could not save Rome from collapse.
The storm approaches. Across Europe, powerful tribes were moving toward Roman lands.
Among them were the Visigoths, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths.
These groups were not simply invaders.
Many were refugees fleeing even more dangerous forces from the east. Their arrival created chaos across Roman territory. Cities were attacked.
Armies struggled to defend the borders.
Then in the year 410 AD, something unimaginable happened.
Rome itself was attacked.
The sack of Rome.
For centuries, the city of Rome had seemed untouchable.
But in 410 AD, the Visigoth king Alaric I led his warriors into the city.
This event became known as the Sack of Rome, 410.
For 3 days, Rome was looted.
The once invincible capital of the world had fallen.
The psychological shock was enormous. People believed the world itself might be ending. Yet amid the chaos,
Christian churches often became places of refuge. Even invading soldiers sometimes spared those who hid inside churches. It was a sign that Christianity's influence had grown far beyond its humble beginnings.
The final collapse.
The Western Roman Empire continued weakening. Emperors rose and fell rapidly.
Military power declined. Finally, in the year 476 AD, a Germanic leader named Odoacer removed the last Roman emperor. That young ruler was Romulus Augustulus.
This moment marked the official end of the fall of the Western Roman Empire, 476 AD.
The empire that had ruled the world for centuries was gone.
But Christianity survived.
Empires collapsed. Cities burned. Armies disappeared.
Yet Christianity remained.
Church leaders stepped into the power vacuum left by Roman authorities. Bishops and priests helped organize communities. They provided education, charity, and stability. One of the most influential leaders of this period was Augustine of Hippo. In his famous book The City of God, Augustine argued that God's kingdom was greater than any earthly empire. Rome might fall, but the spiritual kingdom of faith would endure forever. The rise of the medieval world. As Europe entered the Middle Ages,
Christianity became the central force shaping society. Monasteries preserved knowledge. Missionaries spread the faith to distant lands.
Kings and rulers increasingly aligned themselves with the church.
Even barbarian tribes gradually converted to Christianity.
Slowly, a new civilization emerged from the ruins of Rome. The legacy. Looking back through history, the fall of Rome appears like the end of an era.
But it was also the beginning of something new.
The empire collapsed. Yet the faith that had once been persecuted within it
became the spiritual foundation of Europe. Church bells replaced Roman trumpets.
Cathedrals replaced temples. And the teachings of Jesus continued spreading across continents.
What began with a small group of believers
had become one of the most influential movements in human history. Final reflection. History often remembers kings, battles, and empires.
But sometimes the greatest forces are ideas.
Ideas that survive long after armies are gone.
The Roman Empire ruled the world for centuries.
Yet today, its greatest legacy may not be its roads or its armies. It may be the faith that grew within its borders and outlived the empire itself. Christianity. A movement born in a small corner of the ancient world that would one day reach every continent on earth.
The Roman Empire has changed.
The persecution has ended. Churches are being built. Christians are worshiping openly. The cross that once symbolized suffering is now seen across cities and villages.
But a new challenge appears. Not from swords.
Not from prisons. But from ideas. High voltage, a dangerous teaching spreads. In the city of Alexandria, a priest named Arius begins teaching something controversial. He says, Jesus is not fully God. He was created by God.
There was a time when the Son did not exist.
Some people agree.
Others are deeply disturbed. Because the apostles had taught something different, that Jesus is eternal, divine, and one with the Father. Soon the debate spreads across churches throughout the empire.
Believers argue.
Leaders worry. The unity of the church is at risk.
Crown the emperor intervenes.
The Roman Emperor Constantine the Great realizes the conflict could divide the entire empire.
So he does something never done before.
He calls a global gathering of Christian leaders. More than 300 bishops travel from across the empire to meet in the city of Nicaea in the year 325 AD. Some arrive with scars from past persecutions.
Missing eyes. Broken limbs. Marks of torture.
These men had suffered for their faith.
Now they must defend it. Classical building, the great debate.
Inside the great hall, the discussion begins.
Supporters of Arius present their arguments. Others stand firmly against them.
One young bishop named Athanasius of Alexandria speaks passionately. If Christ is not truly God, he argues,
then he cannot truly save. The debate lasts for weeks. Scriptures are examined. Teachings are compared.
The leaders pray, discuss, and search for truth. Scroll the Nicene Creed. Finally, the council produces a statement of faith. It declares that Jesus Christ is
God from God,
light from light,
true God from true God, begotten, not made, one in being with the Father.
This statement becomes known as the Nicene Creed.
It protects the core belief of Christianity: that Jesus is fully divine and fully Lord. Most bishops sign it. The teaching of Arius is rejected. Unity is restored. Globe showing Europe-Africa the impact.
The Council of Nicaea becomes one of the most important moments in Christian history. It establishes a foundation for Christian theology. It helps guide believers for centuries. And it reminds the Church that truth must be protected not only from persecution,
but also from confusion.
Sparkles, the story continues. The Church now stands stronger, but history is far from finished.
New empires will rise. New challenges will appear.
Faith will spread into new lands and languages. From small gatherings in Jerusalem to councils shaping global belief, the story of Christianity continues to unfold across generations.
And through every age, the same question echoes: who is Jesus?
For millions, the answer remains the same as it was in Nicaea. He is Lord.
If you want, next I can give an even bigger historical cinematic chapter. The Roman Empire once ruled the known world. Its armies conquered nations. Its roads connected continents. Its emperors believed their power would last forever. But history was about to change again. Crossed swords the cracks in the empire.
By the 4th and 5th centuries, the mighty empire begins to weaken. Corruption spreads through leadership.
Economic problems grow. Armies become divided.
At the borders, powerful tribes move closer.
The Visigoths, Vandals, and Ostrogoths begin invading Roman territories.
Cities that once stood proud now fear destruction.
Fire the sack of Rome.
In the year 410 AD, something unthinkable happens.
The city of Rome is attacked by the Visigoths led by Alaric I.
For centuries Rome had been considered untouchable.
But its gates fall. The once glorious capital is looted. Panic spreads across the empire. People begin asking a frightening question: is the Roman world ending? Dove faith in a time of chaos. As political power collapses, something surprising remains strong: the Church. While emperors lose control, Christian leaders continue guiding communities. Bishops organize help for the poor. Monks preserve ancient knowledge.
Churches become centers of stability in a world of uncertainty.
Faith becomes a light during dark times.
Books, the monks who saved knowledge. In quiet monasteries across Europe, monks dedicate their lives to prayer and learning.
They carefully copy ancient manuscripts, scriptures, history, philosophy. Without their work, much of ancient knowledge would disappear forever. Their silent dedication protects wisdom for future generations. New kingdoms rise. As Rome's power fades, new kingdoms emerge across Europe.
Many of these tribes slowly adopt Christianity. Missionaries travel across forests and mountains. They preach not with armies, but with courage and patience.
One by one, kings and tribes begin accepting the Christian faith.
The message that once started in a small Middle Eastern province now spreads across Europe.
Globe showing Europe-Africa the beginning of a new era.
Historians call this period the Dark Ages.
But even in darkness, light remains.
Churches stand where Roman temples once ruled. Monasteries become places of learning.
Faith continues guiding people through uncertain centuries. The empire may have fallen,
but the story of Christianity continues.
Sparkles, the ongoing journey. From the ruins of Rome, a new world begins forming.
Faith travels through missionaries, scholars, and courageous believers.
The gospel continues crossing mountains, seas, and cultures.
And the story that began with Jesus and a small group of disciples keeps unfolding across history. The journey is far from finished.
If you want, next I can give another powerful chapter.